Unmasked, Episode 19, The Boundaries I Built After You. There is something strange about therapy when you have lived through abuse. You walk in thinking you are there to talk about them. What they did, what they said, how they lied, how they controlled, how they wore you down. But somewhere in that process, therapy stops being just about them. It becomes about you. About the parts of you that were conditioned to stay quiet. The parts of you that learned that keeping the peace was safer than telling the truth. The parts of you that confused survival with love. The parts of you that no longer knew where your needs ended and somebody else's demands began. Private therapy did not just help me talk. It helped me understand. It helped me understand that boundaries are not cruelty. They are not punishment. They are not me being difficult. They are not me holding grudges. They are protection, they are self-respect, they are the line between who I am and what I will no longer allow. For a long time, I did not know what healthy boundaries look like. I knew fear, I knew guilt, I knew obligation, I knew hypervigilance. I knew what it felt like to be questioned, pressured, cornered, and emotionally worn down until saying yes felt easier than saying no. I knew what it felt like to over-explain myself to somebody who was never trying to understand me, only trying to regain control. I knew what it felt like to feel responsible for somebody else's moods, reactions, and behavior. But boundaries, real boundaries, healthy boundaries, I had to learn those from scratch. Therapy helped me understand that every time I felt guilty for saying no, that guilt was not proof I was wrong. It was proof I had been conditioned. Conditioned to overfunction, conditioned to people please. Conditioned to fawn, conditioned to minimize my own discomfort, conditioned to hand out access to me that had not been earned, conditioned to believe that being a good person meant tolerating things that were slowly destroying me. And one of the hardest things to hear was how deep that conditioning really went. Because now, when somebody is genuinely kind to me, when somebody is patient, respectful, calm, or considerate, my first response is not relief. My first response is, what do they want? That is what abuse does to your nervous system. It teaches you that kindness is rarely just kindness, that affection usually has a price, that warmth is often followed by withdrawal, that support can be weaponized later, that nice is sometimes just the opening act before control begins. So now when somebody treats me well, I do not always melt into safety. Sometimes I freeze. Sometimes I become suspicious. Sometimes I scan for motive. Sometimes I wait for the switch. Sometimes I'm already bracing for the transaction hidden underneath the kindness. That is trauma. That is hypervigilance. That is a trauma response. That is what happens when your brain has been trained to associate closeness with danger. And therapy gave me language for that, and it taught me about trauma bonding, about coercive control, about intermittent reinforcement, about how abusive dynamics can keep you attached, not because the relationship is healthy, but because the cycle of harm and relief becomes psychologically addictive. My therapist once said something that stopped me in my tracks. She said I was basically in a cult-like relationship, and the truth is that hit me hard because she was right. Not in the dramatic way people picture cults, not robes and chanting and compounds, but in the psychological sense, the isolation, the manipulation, the rewriting of reality, the punishment for disobedience, the confusion, the loss of self, the dependency, the constant pressure to doubt your own instincts and trust their version of events instead. The way your world gets smaller and smaller until their moods, their approval, and their version of reality become the center of everything. That is what it felt like I was being conditioned, like I was being reshaped, like I was slowly being trained to betray myself. And when you have lived like that for long enough, boundaries do not come naturally. They feel dangerous, because boundaries threaten the system that kept the abuse in place. Therapy helped me understand that I was not too much. I was actually somebody who had accepted far too little for far too long. It helped me put words to what I had been carrying in my body, that tight chest, that dread before opening messages, that panic when somebody seemed annoyed with me, that need to keep everything calm, that fear of being painted as the villain the moment I finally stood up for myself. Those feelings were not irrational. They were adaptive responses. They were survival strategies. They were the residue of prolonged emotional manipulation. I had spent so long being taught that my boundaries were inconvenient that I had started to believe my discomfort was the problem. Therapy challenged that. It taught me that no is a full sentence. It taught me that somebody being upset by my boundary does not mean my boundary is wrong. It taught me that discomfort is not the same as danger. It taught me that not everybody deserves access to me just because they demand it. It taught me that protecting my peace is not selfish. It taught me that some people only liked me when I had no limits. That part hurt. Because some people do not actually love you. They love your compliance, they love your tolerance, they love your availability, they love your silence, they love how easy you are to guilt, pressure, manipulate, and pull back in. But healing means becoming less available to people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. That is what private therapy helped me do. It helped me stop asking, how do I make this easier for them? And start asking, why am I making myself smaller just to feel safe? It helped me understand that boundaries are not just about saying no to other people. They are also about saying yes to yourself. Yes to rest, yes to privacy, yes to distance, yes to calm, yes to safety, yes to choosing not to engage, yes to not reopening doors that nearly destroyed you. Sometimes boundaries are loud. Sometimes they sound like, do not speak to me like that, do not touch me, do not contact me again, do not come near me. And sometimes boundaries are quiet. Sometimes they are not replying, not explaining, not defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, not revisiting old pain just because someone else wants access to your wounds. Therapy taught me that both are valid. It also taught me that boundaries are not about controlling other people. They are about deciding what I will do when a line is crossed. That changed everything for me, because I had spent too long trying to get other people to understand. Trying to get them to change, trying to explain my pain in a way that would finally make them gentle. But boundaries are not built on somebody else becoming better. They are built on me refusing to keep abandoning myself, and that is a very different kind of power. I started noticing how often I had ignored my instincts, how many times I had called something not that bad when it was, how often I had rationalized disrespect because confrontation felt exhausting, how often I had second-guessed my own reality. Therapy helped me rebuild trust in myself. If something feels off, I pay attention. If something feels disrespectful, I do not talk myself out of it. If somebody repeatedly crosses lines, I do not keep handing them chances because they know how to apologize well. If protecting myself makes me look cold to people who benefited from my lack of boundaries, then so be it. That is another truth people do not talk about enough. When you start building boundaries, people notice. And not everybody likes it. Some will say you have changed. Some will call you difficult. Some will call you bitter. Some will act like your healing is an attack on them. Some will test the new version of you just to see whether the old version is still accessible. But therapy prepared me for that too. Because healing is not becoming softer for the people who hurt you. Healing is becoming safer for yourself. And maybe one of the biggest things therapy gave me was permission. Permission to stop carrying what was never mine. Permission to stop fixing what I did not break. Permission to stop explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. Permission to stop offering loyalty to people who fed off my exhaustion. Permission to say, this ends here. Private therapy did not make me hard. It made me clear. Clear on what respect looks like. Clear on what love should never feel like. Clear on what I will never excuse again. Clear on the fact that boundaries are not walls to keep everybody out. They are doors with locks. And I get to decide who has a key. That is what I learned. Not everybody is entitled to me. Not everybody is entitled to my time. My energy, my body, my peace, my forgiveness, my explanations, and my softness. And maybe that is what healing really is. Not pretending it never happened, not becoming unaffected, not erasing the damage, but learning, slowly and painfully, that what happened to you does not get to decide what you accept forever. So this episode is for anyone learning boundaries later than they wish they had. For anyone who still feels guilty every time they choose themselves. For anyone whose first response to kindness is suspicion. For anyone whose nervous system still does not know what safety feels like. For anyone sitting in therapy, finally naming the things they survived in silence. You are not cruel for protecting yourself. You are not selfish for saying enough. You are not broken because kindness now makes you question motive. You are not wrong for needing distance. And you are not failing because healing has made you more aware, more cautious, and more guarded. Sometimes the strongest thing you will ever say is not shouted. Sometimes it is simply this: you do not get to do that to me anymore.